Statements by members. Déclaration de député. The honourable member for Milton.
Thanks to the CBC Radio-Canada, Canadians enjoyed open and equitable access to countless hours of amazing sport. From the Paris Olympic and Paralympic Games, Canadians cheered on our incredible athletes as they won medals, broke records, and pushed the limits of human performance. The role that CBC plays as a public broadcaster in connecting Canadians to the Olympic and Paralympic Games is absolutely vital. The accessibility that CBC provides to ensure that everyone, from urban centres to remote communities, can share in the excitement of the Games equally. For decades, CBC has brought the Olympics and Paralympics right into our living rooms and now right onto our devices. Madam Speaker, Scott Russell, the king of Canadian sports broadcasting, has been our host through these moments of triumph and heartache for over 40 years and an astonishing 17 summer and winter Olympic and Paralympic Games. And this summer, Scott announced that Paris would be his final Games as a broadcaster. As he signed off with an emotional farewell, Scott shared that he has had the time of his life. Scott, because of your work, we've had the time of our lives too. So on behalf of the Canadian government, all Canadian athletes, and Canadian sports fans, thank you, Scott. We love you, King.
The honourable member for Bruce Grey, Owen Sound.
Madam Speaker, I'm proud to represent a rural riding which includes many of the Amish community. The Amish do not use electricity, phones, or the internet. They are pacifists, don't vote, and many are dual Canadian U.S. citizens. In April 2021, I first asked this Liberal government how they were communicating border restrictions and requirements to Canadians like the Amish. I followed up this in February, September, and November of 2022, both here in the House and in written questions, as I started getting reports that the community was facing fines in excess of $250,000 for failure to use the ArriveCan app, get the right COVID test, or failure to quarantine. The government finally responded in January of 2023 that they didn't inform the Amish of the rules before they arrived at the border. Now the community is facing approximately $300,000 in fines, and collection agencies have taken liens out against many of the Amish properties. Was this the Liberal government's intent to discriminate against this community? If not, will they now rectify the situation and give the Amish their farms and lives back?
The honourable member for Scarborough Agincourt.
Madam Speaker, Scarborough Agincourt recently lost a beloved community member. Daryl Harding dedicated over 30 years to coaching baseball at Wishing Well Park. His contribution to the Scarborough community and to the game of baseball was inspiring, and his positive impact on youth will be felt for years to come. Daryl's work with the Wexford Agincourt Baseball League was a remarkable example of dedication and commitment to community. In recognition of his volunteering over 1,200 hours to youth baseball each year, Daryl was chosen by the Toronto Blue Jays as a Seat 21 honoree. My condolences go out to Daryl's children and the local baseball community. He will truly be missed. Thank you.
The honourable member for Courtenay Alberni.
Madam Speaker, on July 12th, Port Alberni lost a champion with the sudden passing of its city councillor, former mayor and community activist John Douglas. Before settling in Port Alberni, John worked as a paramedic in Vancouver's downtown east side on the front lines of the toxic drug crisis. He moved to Port Alberni in 2004 and served another 8 years as a paramedic before running for public office. On behalf of the city, he worked closely with First Nations in tourism management and economic development and was a forceful advocate for social planning, mental health and addictions, food distribution and housing solutions for the Alberni Valley. He worked with the Port Alberni Shelter Society, advocating for change in the way addiction treatment is conducted, and a park is named for him in the community. John loved Port Alberni and promoted its potential wherever he went in this world. And on behalf of us all, I offer my condolences to John's wife, Donna, and family. He was a true champion at Port Alberni and will not be forgotten. Rest in peace, my friend.
The honourable member for Orleans.
Madam Speaker, today marks Military Family Appreciation Day, a day dedicated to recognizing and honoring the sacrifice and the unwavering strength of our military families, the backbone of our Canadian Armed Forces. Their dedication and love are fundamental to the success of our service members, enabling them to carry out their vital missions. They sometimes feel overlooked, which is why in the Defence Policy Update, we made commitment to ensure that members and their families are cared for, have additional support and resources available, and ensure that they can live in comfort as they serve Canada. I thank the family members of all of our Canadian Armed Forces members from coast to coast to coast, and including those in my riding of Orléans, families like Major Gabriel Rousseau, his wife Nadia, and their 2 young children, Victor and Camille, for all they do. Merci.
The honourable member for Selkirk, Interlake Eastman.
After 9 years of this Prime Minister, our warships are rusting out, our fighter jets are worn out, this army has been hollowed out, and we're so short of soldiers, sailors, and air crew that our troops are burnt out. We found out last week this Prime Minister spent almost $35 million on new sleeping bags for our troops, but nobody checked to see if they were actually suitable for Arctic conditions. Our troops, while training with our U.S. allies in Alaska, had to resort to using old sleeping bags from the 1960s. This Liberal government is literally leaving our troops out in the cold. When it comes to our military, with these Liberals, it's just failure after failure after failure. From their failure to procure light armored utility vehicles to our troops in Europe having to buy their own helmets, vests, and food, this Liberal government cannot be trusted to keep our troops or Canadians safe. If these Liberals can't get the little things right, how can anyone trust them to get the big things like submarines bought on time and on budget? Our future common sense Conservative government will stand up for our military heroes and ensure they are properly equipped to do their important work to protect Canada.
The honourable member Surrey Centre.
Madam Speaker, Surrey has one of the fastest growing populations in the Lower Mainland, and with that, the number of seniors set to rise over the next 25 years. I'm honoured to share with you all about the groundbreaking of the new Gunanak Diversity Village Seniors Facility opened by the Pick Society of British Columbia. Madam Speaker, behind this much-needed community project is the progressive vision of the late Charn Paul Gill, the CEO of PICS, Satbir Chima, and the countless staff, board members, donors, and volunteers of the organization. This village will have 125 beds housed over a three-story building. This long-term care facility will offer South Asian seniors with high-quality and culturally sensitive care and companionship. Madam Speaker, this is a visionary project, and I cannot wait to welcome seniors to their new home.
The honourable member for Hamilton Mountain.
I attended several Canadian Pride celebrations this summer as part of my role as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Women and Gender Equality and Youth, and I heard appreciation for our initiatives to advance equality, like the first 2S LGBTQI+ Action Plan and the Entrepreneurship Fund. Also, I heard people are terrified of losing the progress we've made, particularly when Conservative premiers are turning healthcare and family decisions political, targeting gender-diverse kids and making them feel unwanted, unworthy, and at risk of harm. And look where that rage farm leads. Here on Parliament Hill today, we have a crowd galvanizing hatred and fear of queer youth. Pride started as a protest. When we celebrate the rainbow at festivals across the country, we are also protesting the intolerance and hatred that is rising in Canada. The Pride community needs us more than ever, and I am proud our government will continue to stand with them, champion equality, and deliver programs that advance equity.
The honourable member for Beauce. Madam Speaker, the Liberals have found a way to expand their coalition, this time by convincing the Bloc to join them in keeping the PM in power. What's the Bloc for? More spending than ever, more public servants than ever, more scandals than ever, and all with Quebecers' money. What the Prime Minister promised the Bloc won't happen. They won't gain anything for Quebecers except another year of increased national debt. The Bloc had the opportunity to work with the future Conservative government and to negotiate for Quebecers on the woodland caribou issue. They must be the worst negotiators in history. Only a Conservative government can solve all the problems caused by this coalition. Canadians will remember what the Bloc and the NDP did to our country. Do they not understand that all Canadians, including Quebecers, want an election now?
Honourable member for Northwest Territories.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to pay tribute to Tony Whitford, a great Northerner who passed away earlier this week. Tony's dedication to public service knew no bounds. He served with distinction in many roles, including as an MLA, a minister, speaker, sergeant-at-arms, deputy commissioner, and commissioner. I had the honor of serving with Tony in the 14th Legislative Assembly in the Northwest Territories as a rookie MLA. At the time, I learned a great deal from him. He was also a dedicated volunteer, spending countless hours supporting local charitable efforts and worthy causes in the North. Tony was a friend to all that knew him, and he will be dearly missed. Our condolences to his family and his loved ones. Masicho, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicolin.
Madam Speaker, after 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time's up. Why is that? 2 years ago, when the NDP leader couldn't beat the Liberal Prime Minister, he joined them. Their cozy coalition has led to higher taxes, food prices, and skyrocketing crime. Recently, the NDP leader said he was ending their partnership, but it was all a charade. He said the Liberal government was the worst ever and claimed it shouldn't be re-elected. Despite his theatrics, the NDP leader once again confirmed yesterday that he still stands with this Liberal Prime Minister. The NDP leader speaks of it being the people's time. Well, I agree. Let's let the people decide who's right and call a carbon tax election now. Canadians can choose between the continually costly coalition of this NDP Liberal government, which means ever higher taxes, less money for gas, groceries, and housing, more crime in our communities. Or Canadians can choose a new government led by our common sense Conservative leader who has a plan to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime.
The honourable for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Madam Speaker, the Liberal member for Kingston and the Islands and pathetic Twitter troll has admitted guilt to spreading disinformation. This disinformation was part of a dirty and deliberate attempt to smear the reputation of a fellow Canadian to change the channel on the absolute rot and corruption that defines 9 years of this Liberal government. Only when legal action was taken and the member was exposed for spreading this vile disinformation did he fall to his knees and apologize. Everyone knows that the apology is fake. The member's actions are part of a broader campaign of smears and deception by a rotten, corrupt government willing to do and say anything to cling to power. The people of Kingston deserve so much better than that member, and Canadians deserve so much better than 9 years of this corrupt Liberal government.
The honourable member for Alfred Pallon. Madam Speaker, as part of the CIBC's Run for the Cure, tonight I'll be participating in the gala organized by the CIBC Laval team employees in support of breast cancer research. The funds raised will help improve the quality of life and provide emotional support for those affected by breast cancer. I wish courage and a speedy recovery to all those affected, and I pay tribute to their resilience, especially my dear sister Nina, as well as Ms. Daniela Lemetti and Amber Leclerc, who will be sharing their experiences tonight with the participants. Many thanks to the event organizers, including Mr. Ihab Zaid, Ms. Rosa Trunzo, Ms. Angelina Yanitsi, and Mr. Nick Calasurdo. The race will take place on Sunday, October 6th, and there's still time to sign up or support the runners. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
For Port Moody, Coquitlam. The third annual Filipino-Canadian National Congress Leadership Convention is happening in Winnipeg tomorrow. Over 200 community and business leaders representing a diverse cross-section of Filipino Canadians will be in attendance, and the theme for this year's convention is strengthening communities from coast to coast to coast. In Port Moody, Coquitlam, we're fortunate to have amazing Filipino community leader Trina Lopez, the founder and chair of the Pinoy Diaspora Canada, and Megan Alvarez, whose friendship and commitment to community building I appreciate and admire. Congratulations to all the attendees at this year's National Congress from me and my colleague from Winnipeg Centre. We, along with NDP MP-elect Leela Dance, look forward to attending the conference, and we want to thank the leadership of the Filipino-Canadian National Congress for inviting us. The honourable member for
The honourable member for Manicouagan. This year, the town of Fairmont, Quebec celebrates its 50th anniversary. When we think of Vermont, we naturally imagine the abundance of iron ore, the immensity of its open pit mines, and its mythical wall. For my part, I think of its pioneers, who now see their children and grandchildren growing up in Vermont, where human warmth is matched only by the love that these people have for their community, even in the northern zone above the 53rd parallel. Supportive, generous, enterprising, and innovative, Vermont citizens make this town what it is, a great place to live where neighbors have become friends, weaving the community together through mutual assistance. All of this magnified by the northern lights, dancing above tides of spruce, moving in the fresh air on cloudless evenings. All this is Vermont. The residents of Vermont, as we look forward to celebrating with you, well, I wish you a happy 50th anniversary, as festive and warm as you are.
The Honourable Member of Calgary Heritage.
Madam Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time's up. This sellout NDP leader has sold out workers, families, and seniors. He skyrocketed food costs. He put his pension ahead of the people, ahead of 2 million lined up at food banks, ahead of 1 in 4 about to lose primary care. He told Manitobans he's done with his costly coalition. Yesterday, he teamed up with the Bloc to prop up this incompetent government. How demure, how mindful. Mr. Speaker, Canadians don't need bigger, corrupt coalitions. They have no confidence in these NDP Liberals. They need a carbon tax election where they can decide between 4 more years of crushing NDP Liberal carbon taxes or a common-sense Conservative government that will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. Let's bring it home.
The honourable member for Scarborough Centre.
Madam Speaker, it was a busy summer in Scarborough. Our annual community barbecue at Thompson Park saw thousands enjoying burgers, samosas, and other treats. We also held an ice cream social, and I attended many great community events from Canada Day to events celebrating the many great cultures that call Scarborough home. At community events, and as I knocked on doors this summer, Scarborough residents told me they are still finding it difficult to make ends meet. They are worried about the cost of groceries and rent. And they are worried that programs that are helping them, such as the Canada Child Benefit, National Child Care, and the new Canada Dental Plan, would be cut by the Conservatives to pay for tax cuts for the rich. As we resume our work in Ottawa, I will be fighting to deliver more help for those working hard to join the middle class, and against Conservative cuts that will cost working people money.
Oral questions. Questions orales. L'honorable.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. After 9 years, well, it's been a tough first week of session for this Prime Minister. A second defeat in a Liberal stronghold. And he's lost his Quebec lieutenant and a member of his caucus. That's right after the poor performance in the by-election. The only good news is that now he has a coalition with the leader of the Bloc Québécois in order to save his bad minority government. How can this Liberal government still ask for the confidence of parliamentarians or Canadians? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, it's a great idea to ask this question on September 20th, the day when the child care benefit is being paid. In my colleague's writing, families are receiving $650, and that's with no tax. There are thousands of families in my colleague's writing. But as usual, the Conservatives want to cut everything, including, according to his leader, the child care benefit. Does my colleague agree with that? The Honourable Member. Madam Speaker, this Liberal bloc is the most centralizing and divisive government ever. It has increased the cost of living, doubled the cost of housing. Even the Quebec Premier is asking the Bloc Québécois to represent Quebec and not vote to perpetuate this government. Will Quebec ministers and members recognize that if the Bloc is not doing its job to represent Quebec, they should try to support Quebec by voting against this Prime Minister or following the lead of member for Honoré Mercier, become independents? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's horrifying, the level of cynicism it takes to decide to attach your political future to the failure of the Canadian economy, like the leader of the Conservative Party did. The leader of the Conservatives said that inflation would never end if we kept on with our policies and refused his policies, but now inflation is back to 2%, the appropriate level. Does he really believe in the silly things he says? Is everything just politics for the Conservatives? The Honourable Member. Madam Speaker, it's very clear that a bad Liberal government for Quebec is bad for Quebecers. The Liberal bloc can try to justify what it's doing, but other than stroking its leader's ego, there's no reason to support this Liberal minority government. When will the Prime Minister of the Liberal bloc let Quebecers vote for a common-sense government which will work hard for the interests of all Quebecers, which will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. My colleague talked about stroking the ego of the Conservative leader. Well, recently, the Conservative leader said that helping children go to school with a good breakfast was bureaucratic. He said that it was red tape to help children who don't have food to get a good breakfast before they go to school to learn. And you talk about feeding the ego of the Conservative leader instead of feeding children in his riding.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. But it was the leader of the NDP who was out trick-or-treating a bit early. He was tricking Canadians into thinking he was going to end his Liberal coalition, and his treat was his pension. As a result of that, more and more Canadians are facing the carbon tax, and we have 9 million Canadians who are facing food insecurity. Will the NDP Liberal government end its tricks and call a carbon tax election so it's Canadians who have the treat?
Hear, hear. I'm hearing some other voices aside from the one who has the floor. I would just ask members to please hold off until it's time for their question or comment. The Honourable Member, l'Honourable Secrétaire Parlementaire.
You know, it's pretty rich for the Conservatives to be talking about pensions as they're actively committed to cancelling Canadians' pensions and their pensions, and the leader of the Conservatives' pensions worth more than $2 million. But as always, Madam Speaker, the three-word slogans coming from the Conservatives don't make sense. They're not even true. Inflation is down. Interest rates are down. Gas prices are way down. And according to the Canadian Climate Institute, thanks to our environmental policies, emissions are down too. Despite this good news, Madam Speaker, the Conservatives don't want to cheer for the Canadian economy or Canadians. They want bad news to tread on.
Again, I'm hearing lots of voices, and I have my speaker on, and I'm having a hard time hearing the answer. So I would ask members to please listen carefully before they speak. The Honourable Member for Foothills.
Here's the real news, Madam Speaker. The number of Canadians facing food insecurity is up 111%. That is 25% of Canadian families who can't afford to put food on the table. Let that sink in. How is that even possible? But that is the stark reality Canadians are facing as a result of the Liberal NDP costly carbon tax, driving up costs on farmers, on truckers, and on food production. The Liberal NDP government has already said they don't work for the people. They work for the Prime Minister. Will this NDP Liberal government put Canadians first and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, time and time again in this House, the Conservatives cite food bank lineups and food insecurity to try to signal that they care about Canadians, while they every day stand up in this House and cheer on bad news and really root for the failure of our economy in Canada. Inflation is down to the Bank of Canada's target rate of 2%. That is good news for all Canadians. That affects food prices in this country. Our government has put forward a grocery rebate, GST rebate, immediate support, and a national school food program. The Conservatives voted against feeding children.
The Député de Saint-Jean.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Today, I'm going to talk about seniors' precarious financial situation. Seniors are listening to us, and they expect us to put aside petty politics. It's completely unjustifiable that people between 65 and 74 are receiving 10% less old age security than people older. at a time when they're facing the same cost of living. There's no reason to create a two-tier system like this. This is age-based discrimination. Will the government put an end to this, or will it have to defend its actions at the ballot box? The Honourable Minister. Well, first of all, Madam Speaker, is that yes, we did increase assistance for seniors 75 and older. As my colleague knows, as we get older, we are less and less able to work. We have higher costs for medication, housing, and transportation. We have always said we will continue to be there for seniors in my riding and elsewhere. And then the good news is that as of July 22nd, there were 8,000 seniors in the riding of Saint-Jean who were part of the new Canada Dental Care Program. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. The Liberals have a choice. They can put an end to this two-tier system and increase old age security for seniors between 65 and 74, or they can keep giving us platitudes, and they'll pay the price for that. But the Bloc Québécois is going to keep hammering the Liberals on this. A government with $34 billion to spend on a pipeline could definitely find the money to support seniors from 65 to 74. Will this government support all seniors from 65 years of age, or will they pay the price at the ballot box? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. My colleague talked about platitudes. It's not a platitude that 8,022 seniors in her riding as of July 22nd will now be able to get affordable, accessible dental care. Many of them have been waiting for this for years because dental care costs a lot. Cleanings, crowns, and so on. It's very expensive and it's painful. While they're not getting care, it's painful. But now there's 8,000 people in her riding, but some are not members yet.
Indigenous peoples represent 20% of unhoused people in Canada. The CEO of Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services, only 0.2% of all funding to end homelessness is going to Indigenous peoples. This means thousands will be living out in this cold this winter because of the Liberals. Conservatives voted against any funding for Indigenous housing. When will the Liberals end its genocidal policies, stop breaking their promises, and ensure Indigenous peoples have places to call their home?
Yes. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services.
Madam Speaker, we are taking action to address the tremendous lack of safe, affordable housing and housing supports for Indigenous peoples in urban, rural and northern communities. Conservatives are pulling from the same old Ottawa knows best approach. Since 2016, we've taken a different approach, working closely with partners to determine the scope and scale of housing needs on reserve. In our efforts to help close the gap, we've increased our funding for on-reserve housing by over 1,100%. We're supporting the construction, renovation, and retrofit of over 36,000 homes in First Nation communities and are co-developing a 10-year housing and infrastructure strategy. We won't stop, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Port Moody Coquitlam.
Really disappointing, Madam Speaker, to see the Liberals stand up when they know they've done less than 2%, 0.2% spending on Indigenous housing need. Today, rental vacancy rates in St. John's bottomed out at 1.5%. That means that even when doing everything right, people still can't find an affordable place to live. This housing disaster is happening because Liberals and Conservatives gave 1 million affordable rental homes to corporate landlords. And now the people of St. John's and everywhere in Canada are paying the price. Why are the Liberals, just like the Conservatives, not protecting Canadians from greedy corporate landlords?
Here. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
It is very true, Madam Speaker, that rent is too expensive in this country. But what's incumbent on all federal parties, including the NDP, is to put forward a plan. The Conservatives don't have a plan, but neither does the NDP. What's our plan to help on rent? We've waived GST from the construction of apartments for lower income and middle class families and individuals. We put forward an acquisition fund to help not-for-profits purchase housing facilities to keep rent affordable. And we've invested in co-op housing, the single largest investment in the past 30 years. Where's the NDP on these issues?
The Honourable Member Kelowna Lake Country.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. The coalition just got bigger after the NDP leader's fake stunt of ripping up his agreement. Now, this NDP Liberal government has new partners in the bloc. These coalition partners support being part of a government that hiked taxes, ballooned food costs, doubled housing costs, and unleashed crime and chaos in our once safe streets. When will Canadians have a carbon tax election so they can decide between this costly coalition government and common sense Conservatives?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. While the member opposite brought up crime and chaos in the streets, let's talk about what the member of St. Albert Edmonton was doing in the Ottawa streets just this past week. He was having cocktails and flirting with fascists who actually interrupted a Terry Fox memorial. Madam Speaker, Conservatives are spending more time with those who are flying Russian flags on Parliament Hill than concerned about Canadian safety.
Order. Order. I want to remind members, if they don't have the floor, they shouldn't be speaking, and there was quite a few of them doing that. So just listen to the answer, whether you like it or not. The order. Order. The member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Madam Speaker, in Kelowna recently, someone broke into a home in Kelowna and stabbed a woman. This was a violent, random crime. And so for the member to talk about discounting crime and chaos in our communities, shame on her. Canadians can't afford this costly coalition that taxes your food, punishes your work, takes your money, doubles your housing costs, and unleashes crime and chaos in our communities. Common sense Conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. When will we have a carbon tax?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, once again we see the Conservatives purporting to support feminism and to be against violence against women, yet what we know is the vast majority that women are subjected to gun violence, yet what do Conservatives do? They're silent. They take on the talking point of the gun lobby over Canadian women who are saying that we need to keep our communities safe and get restricted weapons that are meant for the battlefield off our streets. Why aren't Conservatives standing up for Canadian women?
Again, I want to remind members to please be respectful. They had the opportunity to ask a question. They should take the opportunity to listen to the answer.
Tell her to be respectful.
The Honourable Member for St. Albert Edmonton is out of order, and I would ask him to hold himself back from all of these outbursts. The Honourable Member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Last week, the NDP leader, in a performance, ripped up the agreement with the Liberals, saying, "We will never, ever get back together." But there we are, the first week of Parliament, the first opportunity. The NDP are propping up the Liberal government. No one can keep up with this. They will or they won't SEGA. So, simple question for the parties of the other side. Will they or won't they?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the question wasn't directed towards us, I'll just take advantage of this day about military families to underscore the sacrifice of military families in Canada who help to support our safety here in Canada and elsewhere in the world. I know that there are currently a number of members of our forces who are in Latvia for Operation Reassurance. I'd like to thank all members of the forces and their families for what they do.
The Honourable Member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Taxes are up, costs are up, crime's up, time's up. According to Stats Canada, after 9 years of this Liberal government, 111% more Canadians are dealing with food insecurity. That's 4 million more Canadians who will have trouble feeding themselves tonight. What will it take for this cowardly coalition of the NDP and Bloc to finally stand up with Conservatives and defeat this tired, corrupt Liberal government?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Cynical politicians like the Conservatives have tied their political fortunes to the failure of the Canadian economy. Good economic news for Canadians is actually bad news for the Conservatives. They've told us time and again that there would be perpetual inflation unless we adopted their austerity agenda. Inflation is actually at a historic low, Madam Speaker. It's at 2%, which is exactly the target rate set by the Bank of Canada.
Hear, hear.
Are they really being honest when they speak in this House, or are they just gaslighting Canadians?
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Échemins-Lévis. Madam Speaker, the Bloc Québécois has told the Liberals that they will keep them in power, which means they've sacrificed their ability to negotiate, specifically about the Environment Minister's decree. The Premier of Quebec is asking the Parti Québécois to make their big brother in Ottawa see sense. The leader of the Bloc Québécois should support our motion to fire this incompetent, big spending and centralizing government. And when will the Liberals do something to help communities in the Saguenay region and give up on their order against forestry communities? The Honourable Minister. Well, my colleague had a question for the Leader of the Bloc. It's up to the Leader of the Bloc to answer, but I will just offer some useful information. I will just remind the member that thousands of seniors in her riding received their membership card for the new dental care program. But unfortunately, the leader of her party said on Radio-Canada recently that the dental care system doesn't even exist and there's no point asking for a membership card. Does she believe in her leader, or does she believe in the 16,000 seniors who received their membership card? The Honourable Member. The Bloc Québécois seems to be a terrible negotiator and unable to defend Quebec's interests. It announced openly to the Liberals, "Don't worry, guys, we're not going to cause an election." That doesn't leave them any leeway for negotiation. And it wasn't even able to convince this government to help Saguenay communities that are threatened by this Environment Minister's heartless decree. Will this centralizing spendthrift government support our demand to give up on this destructive environmental order? Once again, Madam Speaker, this is a question for the Leader of the Bloc. I don't know why they're looking at us. But she didn't answer my question. Will she correct the insulting thing that the Conservative leader said yesterday once again? He spent the whole day insulting Quebecers. Will she call him to order and ask him to recognize that the dental care program, which is helping thousands of seniors in her riding, will she ask him to recognize that this dental care program exists?
James Nunavik,
Le fédéral coupe les vivres.
Well, Madam Speaker, the Liberal government is cutting funding to seniors' organizations. It's very upsetting that Ottawa is depriving organization of funding for the Aging Well at Home program because it's refusing to sign an agreement with Quebec. The Liberals know that they are interfering in Quebec jurisdiction and seniors are paying the price. They know very well that Quebec has its own very successful in-home healthcare program. When will they stop this practice of making seniors pay for their petty politics? The Honourable Minister. Madam Speaker, we know that it's very important to help seniors, especially after the pandemic. And that's why the good news is that out of 22 projects for Quebec, 12 have already been approved. That's good news. There will be 10 others to approve. And we need to ensure that this money goes to community organizations in my colleague's riding, and that could be done instantly. That could be done instantly if everyone would just agree. The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Bay James Nunavik EU. The Liberals know very well that they do not have the right to sidestep the government of Quebec. They are trying to leverage community organizations to interfere with Quebec's business, and they're blaming Quebec, saying that Quebec is the bad guy, whereas Ottawa is actually the one who's blocking the money. This would all be over in 5 minutes if the Liberals actually cared about seniors' interests. But instead, this deadlock has been going on for months. When will the Liberals finally stop taking seniors hostage? The Honourable Minister. Well, I'm a bit surprised because we just heard that helping seniors shouldn't be up to the federal government and that MPs in this House should not help seniors in their own ridings. I find that very surprising. we all in this House are responsible for helping seniors. And in this case, they simply need to call members of the National Assembly and tell them that the government should simply accept M30 and go ahead to fund these organizations.
Madam Speaker, 2 years ago, the NDP leader sold out workers when he signed on to the costly coalition that raised taxes, increased food costs, and doubled the cost of housing. Then, 2 weeks ago, he tore up the agreement, he said. But this was just a cheap political stunt to avoid losing a safe NDP seat in a Winnipeg by-election. After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and now time's up. Will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election now? Yes or no?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. While the Conservative Party is so focused on slogans and bumper stickers, we in government will continue to be focused on the real concerns that Canadians have, dealing with issues like inflation, which is, by the way, at 2% today, supporting our seniors, supporting our children, looking in terms of how we can build a stronger and healthier middle class, building a stronger and healthier Canadian economy. That's what we're focused on, while Conservatives are focused on idiotic ideas.
The honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Wow. Conservatives are focused on axing the tax. The Prime Minister plans to quadruple the carbon tax, which has already made life unaffordable for working Canadians, and the NDP leader agrees with him. He's already voted for the carbon tax 24 times, no matter how much it hurts working people. The NDP leader will say or do anything to save himself, proving that he is not worth the cost. Canadians are fed up. They're ready for a common-sense Conservative government to axe the tax. Will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election, yes or no?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, the Conservatives will never let the truth or good news get in the way of their shameless exploitation of the challenges that Canadians are facing these days. And their three-word slogans are not solutions, they are not policies, and they're childish, but they're also fake news. Inflation is down. Interest rates are down. Gas prices are down, and thanks to our environmental policies, emissions are down too. It's disappointing that the Conservative spirits are down with all this good news. It's clear that all they really want is negative news to blame us for. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Madam Speaker, just a few short weeks ago, the NDP leader, in a desperate attempt to stave off an imminent Conservative victory in a once safe seat, told Canadians that he would no longer support this Liberal government. Fast forward 2 weeks, and the great magician has performed a reappearing act, resurrecting his coalition with the Liberals. Canadians did not give this NDP Liberal government a mandate. Taxes are up, food's up, crime's up, and now time's up. When will this Liberal government finally give Canadians a choice and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, what we see is the Conservative Party, that far-right MAGNA Party, which is being led by a leader that does nothing but spread negative news. He goes around every region of the country saying that Canada is broken. Well, have I got news for him, Madam Speaker? Canada is the best country in the world to live and call home. We will continue to be focused on making the conditions better for all Canadians. That is something that we're prepared to do, whether it's a budgetary measure or a legislative measure, because we care about Canadians.
The honourable member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Well, Madam Speaker, this government may claim that they care about Canadians, but Canadians across this country have told us loud and clear they don't care for this Liberal government. If they can't even win seats in downtown Toronto and downtown Montreal, how much longer can these Liberals hold on? Canadians didn't give them a mandate for exploding food prices. They didn't give a mandate for doubling housing prices. And they didn't give them a mandate to triple crime rates across this country. Canadians have been clear. They don't want a tripling of the carbon tax. They don't want 61 cents a litre for the carbon tax. When will this NDP Liberal government finally give Canadians a choice and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Look, Conservative rhetoric is up. Conservative nonsense is up. Rhyming is certainly up. And Canadians are getting fed up. My intention, Madam Speaker, is to do what I've always done, keep my head down, work on the issues with my colleagues. They can keep working on bumper stick and slogans all day long.
The honourable member for Winnipeg Centre.
Madam
Speaker, under the Liberals, Feed Ontario has reported an 8-year high in food bank usage. The report cited the lack of a social safety net as a cause for this crisis. Now, I know the sore losing leader of the Conservative Party is only concerned with protecting his rich friends and that people will get poorer under his watch. So my question is for the Liberals. Will they listen to award-winning economists and support my bill, C-223, to put in place a framework for a guaranteed livable basic income so people can afford to eat?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
It's unfortunate, Madam Speaker, that through some crude political calculus, the NDP has compromised a progressive agenda for Canadians and abandoned the great work that we were doing together on programs like dental care, pharmacare, a national school food program, all of which strengthen the social safety net in this country. We've offered on grocery prices and through elevated inflation a grocery rebate, 50% reduction in childcare fees, a grocery code of conduct. We've got comprehensive reforms to the Competition Act in this country. These are both short-term and long-term measures that are making a difference for Canadians every single day.
The Honourable for South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Madam Speaker, this summer barges along the Mackenzie River were cancelled due to low water levels after a prolonged drought, stranding residents without shipments of supplies. Northerners have made it very clear that they need an all-weather road along the Mackenzie to keep a lifeline to their communities. Both the Liberals and the Conservatives are ignoring these calls. So will the Liberals fund the construction of a road connecting communities in the Satu, or will they keep denying Northerners the infrastructure that they need?
Excellent question.
The Honourable Minister of Northern Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank the honourable member for that very important question. We know that climate change is real. We know that the climate is warming 4 times the rate in the north. The climate is warming 4 times the rate of the rest of Canada, and that's something we need to address. We are doing it with our northern partners, including the Premier of Northwest Territories, who I met about 3 weeks ago, and we had great discussions on the Mackenzie Highway, and that's going to come up in the future.
The Honourable Member for Hamilton East.
Madam Speaker, this week across Canada we're celebrating National Legion Week. Legions significantly contribute to the well-being of veterans and ensure that Canadians remember the sacrifices they've made. In my riding, Stony Creek Legion Battlefield Branch 622, led by Stuart Jones, is a powerhouse of support for veterans. His leadership is truly inspiring, and we are deeply grateful. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Veterans Affairs share with this House how our government has been there to support Legions and their incredible community contributions?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There are over 1,350 Legion branches across Canada, including Wally Legion Branch 229 in my hometown of Surrey. Their members represent one of the largest volunteer bases in this country. It's why we set up Veteran Organization Emergency Support Fund during the pandemic so that they could safely keep their doors open. And it's why we've been proud to support Legions to improve infrastructure, make accessibility upgrades, and deliver many new horizons for seniors projects. I want to thank the member for highlighting the Legion's impact in the community, and I hope members will join us in thanking Legions for all they do to build a stronger Canada.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Shepherd.
Madam Speaker, after 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time's up. 2 years ago, the NDP leaders sold out workers and signed a costly coalition deal with the Liberal Prime Minister. That deal hiked taxes, ballooned food costs, doubled housing prices, unleashed crime and chaos on our once safe streets. Will the Prime Minister finally call a carbon tax election so Canadians can choose between the costly coalition or common sense Conservatives who will axe the carbon tax?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. I'm actually quite concerned about where the Conservatives are getting many of their ideas these days. You see, because records show that the Conservative leader got his advice on how to help Canadians struggling with the cost of living from a Loblaws lobbyist. He gets his advice on Ukraine from Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson, Madam Speaker. He's courted support from misogynists and far-right hate groups. And these are the advisors that I think Canadians should be afraid of.
Right. The Honourable Member Calgary-Shepherd.
It's just too bad that this Prime Minister, the only buddy he cares about is the one he has in the NDP and their leader, who voted 24 times to hike the carbon tax. And over the summer, while door knocking, what I heard clearly from Calgary to British Columbia to Ontario, everywhere I went, I heard the same thing. Canadians are fed up with the skyrocketing costs of food, gas, and housing. From food to housing, they're sick of paying for the NDP Liberal coalition's failures, and Canadians deserve better. Why won't the Prime Minister and his NDP backers let Canadians have their say in a carbon tax election right now?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, it was interesting this summer to see our athletes compete at the Olympics. When our gymnasts at the Olympics stick a landing, all of us cheer. I think we should do the same this week, certainly with the Bank of Canada and the Government of Canada sticking the economic landing of inflation coming down to 2%, which is the Bank of Canada's target rate. That's what happened this week, Madam Speaker. Only the Conservative Party in this House did not cheer for Canada's economy. Just like this summer when they couldn't bear it when our athletes did well at the Olympics, winning gold medals. They did not cheer. They're never cheering for Canada's success.
Member for Bull River.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes up, costs up, crimes up, time is up. The NDP leader's publicity stunt got some airtime, but when it comes to voting against the government that he said was finished, he caves. Carbon tax already cost trucking industry $2 billion. Now, with this quadrupling, it will be expensive for our trucking industry to survive. Will they listen to Canadians and call a carbon tax election now? So common sense Conservatives can axe the tax now. Thank you.
Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. And once again, these Conservatives will never let the truth get in the way of their exploitation of the real challenges that Canadians are facing. They don't want to acknowledge the fact that in Canada, inflation is down to the target rate of 2%. Interest rates are down, gas prices are down, and emissions are down, Madam Speaker. But we've heard it from the Conservatives over and over again. They'll never cheer for the Canadian economy. But this summer, when we were all cheering on our Canadian athletes, I barely heard a squeak from the Conservative side. And in fact, the Conservative leader never even tweeted once about the Paralympics. That's really disgusting, Madam Speaker. We should all be on the side of Canada.
Order. The honour for Regina, Wisconsin.
Madam Speaker, after 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Despite the NDP leader's video claiming to tear up his support for the Liberals, the two parties continue to make life less affordable for Canadians. They have promised to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents per litre. Madam Speaker, why doesn't the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election so Canadians can decide if they want to continue to pay his carbon tax?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the President of the Treasury Board.
Madam Speaker, inflation is down, interest rates are down, car theft is down, gas prices are down, emissions are down, and all Conservatives can do is frown. I just don't understand why we don't have a Team Canada approach. The Canadian economy is getting better. Things are getting better. Why don't Conservatives try to work with us and make things better? That's the kind of House of Commons I want to be in.
House Father, yeah.
The Honourable Member for Rimouski, Nijet, Témiscouata, Les Basques. Once again, we need to bring up Amira El-Gawabi. The Prime Minister's advisor on Islamophobia has given herself a rather broad mandate. She wants to dictate to universities which professors they should hire on the basis of religious criteria. That goes against the principle of secularism. She even wants to dictate the training that universities should offer them. This is clearly not desirable, nor is it any of her business. On Tuesday, the National Assembly of Quebec once again unanimously called for her to resign. But once again, she won't resign. When will the Prime Minister finally show her the door?
L'Honorable Ministre.
The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. As my colleague may know, I worked in universities for a long time, and I understand how incredible Quebec's universities are. They're renowned in Canada and around the world. We fully trust Quebec's universities to make the right decisions for them, but it's also important to consider diversity in such a large and diverse country as Canada. It's a blessing that we have this diversity. The Honourable Member. Ms. El-Gawabi's mandate is supposed to be building bridges, but all she's doing is digging gulfs and divides. She embodies a risk associated with excessive multiculturalism promoted by Canadian political parties. What risk is that? Well, when we care only about the needs of one interest group and when we're blind to the needs of others, that is not good for social cohesion. Ms. El-Gawabi is doing more than demonstrating that she's not the right person for the job. She is, in fact, demonstrating that the position itself should be scrapped. Will the government finally put an end to this failed experiment? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's very easy to engage in divisive politics. It's easy to divide Canadians and Quebecers. Anyone can do that. What is more difficult to do, and also more important to do, is to unite people. We all in this room have the responsibility and the ability to unite people, whether we're Quebecers, from any walk of life, of any religion. We are all equal Quebecers in the eyes of the law, and we all have the right to live with dignity and to live well.
Madam Speaker, after 9 long years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. 2 weeks ago, the NDP leader made a big spectacle of tearing up the costly coalition agreement with the Liberals. But now he says the NDP will vote to keep them in power. What's the truth? It's all a stunt to trick voters. British Columbians are struggling and want to change election. Will the Liberals axe a tax or call a carbon tax election today?
Parliamentary Secretary.
You know what else British Columbians care about, Madam Speaker? Their workers care about unions. Yesterday, in front of the parliamentary committee that's responsible for labour issues, we heard what the Conservative position on unions actually is. They would allow for unions to be starved of membership dues that are vital for their functioning. That means unions wouldn't, among other things, be able to collectively bargain on behalf of their members. On the one hand, they talk about workers. You scratch the surface, Madam Speaker, you find a party that's the same old thing. They do not care about Canadian workers.
The honourable member for Edmonton Manning.
Madam Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. Even after their breakup, the leader of the NDP is keeping this Prime Minister in power. What a surprise. That means quadrupling the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre, driving more Canadians to food banks and grinding our economy to a halt and killing hundreds of thousands of jobs. That means he's punishing hardworking Canadians just to keep his pension. When will the Prime Minister do the right thing and call for a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Again, Madam Speaker, pretty rich for the Conservatives to stand up in this House when they've introduced legislation when they were in government to raise the retirement age to 67 and gut Canadians' pensions. Madam Speaker, we're the party that reformed CPP and brought forward more senior supports. We are working to ensure that Canadians' pensions are strong, Madam Speaker. But I have to mention, that member from British Columbia stands in this House all the time to rail against carbon pricing. He was part of the Liberal government in British Columbia that brought forward Canada's first ever carbon tax, a successful measure that has lowered their emissions in British Columbia for over a decade. The hypocrisy, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Beauce. Madam Speaker, the Bloc Liberal coalition is costing Quebecers and Canadians more and more. The Liberal Bloc voted for $500 billion worth of inflationary centralizing spending. Frankly, what good is the Liberal Bloc? They're spending more than ever, they're causing more scandals than ever before, and hiring thousands more public servants, ballooning big bureaucracy with Quebecers' money. What does the Bloc support? Well, they support the Prime Minister and his government. Only a Conservative government can clean up this mess. What's the Prime Minister waiting for to call an election now? The Honourable Minister. Madam Speaker, my colleague surely knows that Quebecers have already experienced Conservative austerity, and they didn't want more of it. Quebecers know that when we invest in them, when we help the most vulnerable, when we help seniors, that's how we help Quebecers get through tough times, like the tough times we experienced during the pandemic. My colleague knows full well that we were able to invest in Canadians, all while getting inflation back down. It's back into the normal target range now. So we don't want Conservative austerity, and neither do Quebecers. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Châteauguay-Lacolle. Madam Speaker, we know that families across the country are struggling with the cost of living, including in my riding of Châteauguay-Lacolle, which will soon be called Châteauguay-Les-Jardins de Napierville. The Canada Child Benefit is a source of support for families in my community. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development please inform the House of the impact that this important benefit has had on Canadian families? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker. For over 4 million Canadian families, the Canada Child Benefit has made a real difference. They can receive up to $5,000 per child under 5 and $7,000 for children over that age up to 17. The benefit was increased in July of this year. It will now be about $350 more per year as compared to last year. And the benefits have already been sent out. The Conservatives, though, they would cut this program and they would leave families to struggle.
And Rideau Lakes. Well, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up, with jaw-dropping news about carbon tax Carney. His investment firm owns the second largest mortgage insurer in Canada, and these Liberals changed the rules to allow for larger and longer mortgages, meaning higher interest payments and more money in carbon tax Carney's pocket. His company's stock shoots to 6-month highs, and he tells the Prime Minister to raise the carbon tax on Canadians. Is that supposed to be a good deal for Canada?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Unlike the Conservatives, we do see the value in consulting experts from across Canada. But let's talk about where the Conservatives have been getting their advice lately. You see, the leader of the Conservative Party gets his advice on how to help Canadians with the rising cost of food from a Loblaws lobbyist. They also get their advice from Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson. Madam Speaker, these Conservatives get their advice from misogynists and far-right hate groups, and I think Canadians should be very concerned.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
It's a new conflict of interest every single day with carbon tax Carney. His buddy, the CEO of Telesat, got $2.14 billion in a check from this government for what other companies say they could do for half the cost. His investment firm is in discussions with the Liberal government for $10 billion taxpayer dollars, and like I just said, his investment firm is also going to be cashing in with 6-month stock price highs after changes to the mortgage rules. Is it any wonder that this Liberal Prime Minister, twice found guilty of breaking ethics laws himself, is trying to shield carbon tax Carney from Canada's conflict of interest regime?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, you know, sadly, what else is up? Character assassination. It's unacceptable, Madam Speaker, to come into this chamber and time after time go after individuals' character. It undermines the integrity of this institution, and Canadians are fed up. I would have thought this member of all people would have learned that lesson some time ago, but apparently I was wrong. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
Madam Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. Carbon tax Carney's appointment as a de facto finance minister is more of the same boondoggle this government is famous for. Almost immediately, a $10 billion contribution to one of the companies that he serves on is announced, shoveling an extra $200 million per year to Brookfield, and carbon tax Carney shoving more money in his own pockets. Why did the Prime Minister exempt his de facto finance minister from conflict of interest rules?
The Honourable Secretary Parlementaire.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
The Conservatives stop betting against the success of Canadians. Canada's growth is actually projected to beat all of our peers, the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, and I could go on. But the Conservatives have hitched their political and electoral fortunes on the failure of the Canadian economy. The truth is that we are making the economic pie larger and larger so that every Canadian could get a larger slice, Madam Speaker. When will the Conservatives stop betting against the success of Canadians?
The honourable member for Scarborough Centre.
Madam Speaker, this summer, millions of Canadians tuned into the CBC and Radio Canada to cheer on Team Canada at the Olympic and Paralympic Games in Paris. Canadian athletes set new records and made us all so proud. Scarborough is home to many athletes who train at the Toronto Pan Am Sports Centre, but it is also an important community hub for activities and events. We are proud of our local heroes like Scarborough's Josh Leondo, who became the first Black Canadian swimmer to win an Olympic medal. Can the Parliamentary Secretary for Sports and Physical Activity let this House know how we are supporting athletes so they can keep representing Canada with pride and excellence?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Canadians are proud to celebrate the exceptional performances of Team Canada athletes this summer as they won a record number of medals and inspired the next generation of Olympic athletes. And Madam Speaker, through Budget 24, our Liberal government boosted the Athlete Assistance Program that supports Canadian athletes. These carding checks directly support over 1,800 athletes across more than 94 sports. But we're also investing more broadly in participation, Madam Speaker, not just for future sports stars, but also to support the physical and mental health, the strength of our communities through the power sport, physical activity and recreation. Our community Sport for All has brought sport to over 1 million Canadians so they could try new sports and activities, because when Canadians are moving, our whole country wins.
The honourable member for North Island, Powell River.
Communities in my riding have been waiting for the plan for open net fish farms. It was supposed to be released in June. The Liberals instead announced that they'd be announcing a plan later. The Liberals have spent years delaying on real job strategy for all of those who will be impacted. Coastal communities must not be left behind. Will the Liberals stop the delay and ensure the plan delivers necessary funds to support impacted First Nations and coastal communities?
Hear, hear. Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Fisheries, Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Our government is committed to protecting wild Pacific salmon and will implement a ban on open net pen salmon aquaculture in British Columbia by 2029. Fisheries and Oceans Canada is working to ensure that the draft transition plan for salmon aquaculture is measured and indeed responsible. It is important to take the time necessary, Madam Speaker, to get the draft transition plan right, given its importance to British Columbians. Work on the draft transition plan is underway and will be released in the coming weeks.
The honourable member for Spadina, Fort York.
Madam Speaker, Khaled Bearcat is a member of Samidoun and a leader of designated terrorist group Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine. Bearcat was banned from entering the EU, and Germany banned Samidoun outright. Yet in Canada, Bearcat is free to spew hatred. At one rally, he said Canada should condemn the killing of terrorist leaders and that he hopes for Israel's destruction. Will the Liberal government take action to have Bearcat arrested for hate propaganda and list Samidoun as a terrorist organization, or will it continue to be a doormat?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, in no way, shape or form is hate speech or the support of terrorism allowed in our country. We are deeply concerned about these statements. We are looking into this situation, into this matter. We take the member opposite's question seriously and are here to promote a Canada that is united together, that confronts discrimination and is in harmony. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
And that brings us to the end of question period.
As mentioned during the statement from the Speaker on 16th of September, the volume of earpieces will now be reset. Members using their earpiece at this time will have to readjust the volume. I thank them for